Hello everyone. Today we are going to see chapter 9 of science, that is friction. In this chapter we will see what is friction and what are its types. So let's start. Force of friction. Friction is the force that opposes motion when the surface of a body comes into contact with that of another body. The force of friction always acts on all the moving objects and its direction is always opposite to the direction of motion. For example, a ball rolling along a ground slows down and finally it comes to rest. When stop paddling a bicycle, it gradually slows down and finally comes to a stop. In this picture, we can see a force is being applied on an object in the forward direction and the force of friction is acting in opposite direction. Factors affecting friction. What causes friction? Friction is caused by the irregularities on the two surfaces in contact. Even though the surfaces they appear very smooth, but they have large number of minute irregularities on them. Irregularities on the two surfaces lock into one another. When we attempt to move any surface, we have to apply a force to overcome the interlocking. On smooth surfaces, there are lesser irregularities between the two surfaces, whereas on rough surfaces, there are larger number of irregularities. So, the force of friction is greater if a rough surface is involved. In this picture, we can see there are three different cases, and in each case, a toy vehicle is being released from the top. And in each case, the distance traveled by the vehicle is different. Here, the distance traveled is maximum because of the smooth surface. Here, the distance traveled is little less because of the rough surface, and here the distance traveled is very less because of the rough surface, which shows that this surface has larger number of irregularities compared to this rough surface, and if there are more irregularities means the friction is greater. Spring balance. Spring balance is a device used for measuring the force acting on an object. This is a spring balance. It consists of a coiled spring which gets stretched when a force is applied on it by an object. Stretching of string is measured by a pointer moving on a graduated scale. The reading of the scale gives the magnitude of the force. Now, in the spring balance, a metal bob is attached through a hanger. Because of the mass of the metal bob, the spring is stretched out, and wherever it stops, it gives mass of that object which is marked by a pointer on a graduated scale. Types of friction. There are three different types of friction: static friction, sliding friction, and rolling friction. Static friction. Frictional forces acting between the two bodies which are in contact but are not sliding with respect to each other. The friction in such case is called static friction. In other words, we can say static friction is the force of friction on an object that is not moving or it is at rest. Example, a force is applied on a stationary almirah and it does not move as it is held by static friction. If the external force applied is less than the value of static friction force, the object does not move. So, to make the object move from its rest position, the applied external force must be greater than the value of static friction force. Sliding friction. The frictional force present when one object slides or moves over the surface of another object is known as sliding friction. When an object has already started moving or sliding, the irregularities on the surface they do not get enough time to log into the irregularities on the surface of other object completely. So it is easier to keep an object moving which is already in motion than to move the same object from rest. Rolling friction. When one body rolls over the surface of another body, the resistance to its motion is called rolling friction. For example, wheel, ball, etc. The rolling friction depends on the nature of rolling object. If the rolling object has a smooth surface, then it will move with less resistance, and if it is rough, its movement will be highly restricted. The quality of the surface on which the body rolls. If the surface is smooth, there will be less friction, and if the surface is rough, there will be more friction. Diameter of the rolling object. The bigger the diameter, the smaller the friction. Area of rolling body. If the surface area is more, the point of contact will be more. This will in turn result in more friction. Load. As the load increases, the friction also increases. Now the difference between static friction, sliding friction and rolling friction. Static friction is the force acting on an object when it is at rest. Sliding friction is the force required to keep the object moving with the same speed over the surface of another object, and rolling friction is when one body rolls over the surface of another body. Static friction is the highest. The sliding friction is lower than the static friction, but it higher than the rolling friction, and rolling friction is the lowest. If we look at the descending order, static friction, then the sliding friction, and then the rolling friction. Friction, a necessary evil. Advantages of friction. Examples. Friction enables us to walk without slipping. It enables a car to move on road without skidding. It enables us to apply brakes and slow down or stop a moving car. It helps in generating heat when we rub our hands together. Disadvantages of friction. Examples are: it always resists the motion, so extra energy is required to overcome it. It wears out the materials, whether they are screws, ball bearings, or soles of shoes. It produces heat, causing wastage of energy in machines. It causes wear and tear of machines and also produces noise in machines. Forest fires are also caused due to friction between the tree and branches. Increasing and reducing friction. Ways to increase friction. Examples are: the sole of shoe is grooved to provide the shoes better grip on the floor so that we can move safely. The treaded tires of cars, trucks and bulldozers, they provide better grip with ground. Using brake pads in the brake system of bicycles and automobiles. While when we are riding a bicycle, the brake pads do not touch the wheels, but when we press the brake lever, these pads arrest the motion of the rim due to friction. The kabaddi players rub their hands with soil for a better grip of their opponents. Gymnasts apply some porous substance on their hands to increase friction for better grip. Ways to minimize friction. Friction is reduced to increase efficiency. Examples: sprinkling fine powder on the carom board. Few drops of oil are poured on the hinges of the door so that the door moves smoothly. A bicycle and a motor mechanic uses grease between the moving parts of these machines. The substances which reduce friction are called lubricants. When oil, grease, or graphite is applied between the moving parts of machines, a thin layer is formed, and these moving surfaces do not directly rub against each other. Interlocking of irregularities is avoided to a great extent and the movement becomes smooth. Sometimes other than lubricant, an air cushion between the moving parts of machine is used to reduce friction. Fluid friction. Fluid friction is the force that opposes a motion that takes place within fluids or in between fluids. Liquids and gases are called fluids. Air is very light and thin, yet it exerts frictional force on objects moving through it. Example, aeroplane, birds, etc. Similarly, water and other liquids exert force of friction when objects move through them. Example, fishes, frog, etc. The frictional force exerted by fluids is also called drag. The frictional force on an object in a fluid depends on its speed with respect to the fluid, shape of the object, and nature of the fluid. When objects move through fluids, they have to overcome friction acting on them, and in this process, they lose energy. So, efforts are made to minimize friction. So, the objects are given special shapes which would make them lose less energy in overcoming friction, and this type of shape is known as streamline shape. All the vehicles are designed to have such shapes which reduce fluid friction. If this video was helpful to you, then please like it, share it, and subscribe it. Thank you.